Hello students, welcome to E-Pathshala. My name is Prerna Trehan. I'm an assistant professor at GGDST College, Punjab University, Chandigarh, and in today's module we shall be looking at the concept of equality. In present times, through protests and social movements, equality has come to be one of the most accepted concepts, and yet it firmly remains in the territory of essentially contested concepts as well. In the following module, we shall try to deconstruct this concept of equality and look at its various contours. The module follows a fixed structure. Firstly, we shall be looking at the historical trajectory of the concept of equality and how it evolved. In the second part, we shall look at the various understandings as well as the meanings of equality that have been thrown up by various kinds of scholarships. Moving on, we shall further delve into the various aspects of equality, moving from formal equality to the concept of equality of welfare, therein the equality of opportunity, and we shall especially be looking at Dworkin's concept of equality, including his ideas of luck as well as insurance. Furthermore, we shall be focusing on Amartya Sen and his work on equality of what. Furthermore, it shall also include equality of capabilities. Lastly, the last part of the module shall include concluding remarks, giving forth a holistic view on what the concept of equality includes and what are the missing parts therein. The moral inequalities are at the center of Rousseau's thesis on inequality. He attributes loss of freedom to the inequality produced by the emergence of private property. The civilized people develop social classes based on property, and along with social inequalities comes the loss of liberty. It is said about equality that few terms of political discourse have enjoyed such a long life and played such an important role in the making of modern history. It is one of the most popular as well as controversial ideal. The Oxford Dictionary of English defines equality as a state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities. Aristotle can be termed as the first thinker to write on equality. Aristotle explains equality as corollary to justice. He writes that justice means equality for equals and inequality for unequals. Further, he asserts that the city is partnership in living well for the sake of a complete and self-sufficient life. Aristotle talked of equality only for the class of citizens, and slaves and women were excluded from this class of citizens. Cicero, writing on political inequality during the Roman period, argues that though all human beings share the faculty of reason and therefore are equal in their capacity to grasp what is just and lawful, but at the same time all people are not equally rational and therefore not equally law-abiding. He clarifies this further and says that the equality enjoyed by humans at birth is in effect eradicated by differences of environment, so wisdom ultimately remains with the few and the multitude remain in a state of ignorance. Hence Cicero does not support democracy because it fails to respect the inequality of humans. In the modern period, Thomas Hobbes defined equality as everyone is equal in rights and the ability to survive in the state of nature. But because state of nature is a wretched condition, men must be ready to suffer anything to be out of it. Inequality is artificial, not natural, but is a part and parcel of decent life. Therefore, Hobbes supported inequality as an essential component of decent living. John Locke accorded that basic equality is the strongest grounding as an axiom of theology. Defending Locke, Jeremy Waldron argues that for Locke, basic equality is the most important truth about God's way in the human world regarding social and political implications of his creation of the human person. He quotes from Locke's second treatise that God created all of us in a state of equality wherein all powers and jurisdiction is reciprocal, no one having more than the other. Rousseau, In his famous work Discourses on the Origins of Inequality, written in 1754, also known as the Second Discourse, discusses the concept of equality at length. He distinguishes between two kinds of inequality, that is physical and political. Physical inequality is in terms of strength, capacity, looks, etc. These he refers to as natural inequalities. Political or moral inequalities, on the other hand, are not natural but conventional, that is established by the consent of man. The moral inequalities are at the center of Rousseau's thesis on inequality. He attributes loss of freedom to the inequality produced by the emergence of private property. The civilized people develop social classes based on property, and along with social inequalities comes the loss of liberty. For Rousseau, inequality of property destroys the innate goodness of men and produces competition for economic goods. Hence, for Rousseau, political inequality, though cannot be fully remedied, but can be overcome to some extent through a rule by direct democracy and general will. Even in contemporary times, most social movements are based on demands for equality. The proponents of social movements assert that equality is a basic human right and must be guaranteed some basic rights which enable them to live a life of dignity without hunger, poverty, malnutrition, and discrimination. The kinds of equality. Thomas Nagel characterizes 4 kinds of equalities, that is, legal, political, social, and economic. He argues that political equality, if taken as one person, one vote, legal equality as the right to file a lawsuit and trial, and social equality, if considered as abolition of titles and special privileges, can only be considered as formal equality and not real equality, as none of these can guarantee the removal of substantive inequalities which he considers are dependent on economic factors. Legal equality means equality before law. That is, law applies equally to all individual citizens, irrespective of their caste, religion, language, and gender. But this equality becomes hollow if an individual belongs to an underprivileged class and is unable to hire a good lawyer. Such individuals may suffer acute inequalities and lose the trial. Hence, equality before law or legal equality requires equality of basic resources. But economic equality is far from reality. In our societies, we witness few people who own large resources and a huge percentage of population that does not even have basic amenities like water, food, and shelter. Hence, legal and political social equality are ideals in almost all the constitutions of the world, but reality is far different. Political equality defined in such narrow terms may render useless, as people facing poverty may not leave one-day wage to vote. Social equality cannot be granted simply by abolishing titles. This we have witnessed in India. Even after 65 years of abolition of titles by Article 17 of our Constitution in 1949, inequality on grounds of caste and name still persists in the Indian society. Political equality has been explained very well by Sidney Verba, who includes various activities such as political campaign, participating in local community activities, contacts with public officials, and protests. These he terms as equal activity, which is crucial for equal consideration because political activity is a means by which citizens inform the governing elites about their needs and preferences. This he considers very important for democracy. Equality of what? The first question any scholar of equality has to answer is equality of what? What here connotates various things such as claims, rights, status, opportunities, welfare, resources, and privilege. Professor Amartya Sen, in his widely cited article Equality of What, proposes a basic concept of basic capability equality and criticizes three prevalent conceptions of equality, that is utilitarian, equality as utility, and Rawlsian conception of equality. He argues that all of the above conceptions have serious limitations. Defining utilitarian equality as the equality derived from the utilitarian concept of goodness applied to problems of distribution, Sain asserts that the utilitarian conception of equality based on maximum utility requires equality of marginal utility. That is, equal treatment of everybody's interests provides an inadequate index of measuring utility on moral grounds, and marginal utility cannot be taken as identifiable with indicators of social importance. Further, he challenges the utilitarian conception of equality as undermining the fundamental diversity of human beings. He explains that humans are not homogeneous, and hence treating their needs as mere utilities can lead to gross inequalities. Sain hence quotes John Harency that utilitarianism leads to unfair discrimination by equating between one person's and another person's equality urgent human needs. Secondly, Sain criticizes the total utility equality, also known as welfarism. He sees it as a matter of direct observation and is based on ranking with regards to two cases of non-equal distributions. One such ranking, Sain asserts, is provided by a lexicographic version of maxim rule, like John Rawls' difference principle, the only difference being that Rawls talks of primary goods and not utilities. Thirdly, Sain argues against the principle of Rawlsian equality as he asserts the difference principle of Rawls by talking about hard cases which do not take into consideration inequalities that arise from disabilities, special needs, physical and mental disabilities. Basic capability equality. Amartya Sen's main thesis is that all the above theories miss the point of basic capabilities. He defines basic capabilities as a person being able to do certain basic things like needing shelter, food, clothing, movement, to participate in social life, etc. These basic capabilities, Sain claims, as fundamental, and the earlier three conceptions of equality do not take this into consideration. The issue, according to Sain, is the interpretation of needs in the form of basic capabilities, which is implicit in the demand for equality. Equality as capability depends on a person's capability to live a good life and is defined in terms of the set of valuable beings and doings like being in good health or having loving relations with others to which they have real access. Sain proposes the basic capabilities equality as a natural extension of Rawls' concern with primary goods, shifting attention from goods to what goods do to human beings. The basic capabilities equality, Sain claims, is compatible with diversity of cultures, which gives significance to different values, cultures, and it is gender sensitive. Equality of resources. Ronald Dworkin somewhat follows John Rawls' principle of veil of ignorance, which Dworkin calls the auction. But even before Dworkin discusses auction, he clearly mentions that the principle of equality of resources is a matter of equality in whatever resources are privately owned. This means that Dworkin's conception of equality of resources is not about distributing public resources and political power. Hence, resources with the state are not included in Dworkin's equality of resources. But in most cases, resources are publicly owned by state, and it is precisely the distribution of such resources that leads to conflicts. Auction, luck, and insurance. Dworkin supports the idea of economic market as a device for setting price of a variety of goods and services, and therefore market must be at the center of any theoretical development of equality of resources. This he tries to prove by the famous example of shipwreck and its survivors who are washed up on an island which has abundant resources. These survivors, whom Dworkin calls the immigrants, accepts the principle that no one is antecedently entitled to these resources, but that they shall be divided equally among the survivors. For the equal distribution of resources, Dworkin develops what he calls the envy test. It is a test of equal division of resources. According to Dworkin, no division of resources is equal division if any one survivor prefers someone else's share to his own share. Secondly, what if a person elected as divider distributes the resources equally among all survivors? Still, there is a scope for envy because the survivor A might not be happy with her share but might prefer another share. What will happen if the divider is unfair? So the divider must devise a method which will take care of arbitrariness and unfairness. To this, Dworkin provides the solution of auction. He explains the auction as follows. Each survivor is given an equal number of clamshells, which are evenly distributed among them, and each item in the island is listed to be sold by auction. This minimizes the amount of unfairness and arbitrariness and leads to equal distribution of resources. Hence now, no one will envy the other. But Dworkin argues that auction will be successful only for a short while, as some survivors may be more skillful and smart to produce what others want. But some may stay healthy, some may fall sick, some may work more, some may work less, and hence again there shall be inequality. This Dworkin calls luck. Further, he differentiates between two kinds of luck. Firstly, option luck, and second, brute luck. Option luck is a matter of how deliberate and calculated gambles turn out, whether sum or losses or gains through accepting an isolated risk and the anticipation of such risks. Brute luck is a matter of how risks fall out that are not deliberate gambles. Hence, he divides the option of insurance, which provides link between option and brute luck by providing the option to buy insurance, which then is a calculated gamble. Dworkin argues that he does not support equality of resources to be applied as a political ideal, but that any principle of justice needs an original position, howsoever abstract it might be. It cannot be taken as the beginning of a political philosophy, but that the force of original position as a device for justice needs a deeper interpretation of equality of resources argument. Equality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity is one of the most well accepted forms of equality in democratic world. Scholars such as James Fishkin, Richard Arneson, David Miller, Alan Buchanan, William Galstone conceptualize equality of opportunity as based on merits and equal competition in liberal societies. John Rawls can also be credited with giving his exposition on equality of opportunity in his two lexical principles. According to him, there are differences among individuals due to natural assets such as being well in a well-off family, having resources for education, and leading a good life. For Rawls, equality of opportunity goes beyond the common understood notion of persons of equal talent and motivation having equal prospects for attaining social offices and positions. In order to compensate those who still suffer, Rawls writes that inequalities should be so arranged so as to maximize the life prospects of the worst off. Norman Daniels wrote on extending Rawlsian equality to healthcare, as healthcare falls under special case and denial of healthcare adversely affects individuals' capability to grab opportunities. Equality of opportunities is easier if it's not equated with equality of outcomes. James Fishkin argues that liberty and equality of opportunities will not be in conflict if equality of opportunity is not seen as equality of outcomes. If equality of opportunity is seen merely as a situation where everyone of similar capacity and skills gets a fair chance to compete for state jobs, then it does not appear so controversial. But once we talk of equal outcomes, conflicts seep in. According to Riemer, the goal of equality of opportunity is to establish policy that compensates people for negative circumstances in order to establish a society in which individual effort is the only thing that matters. He uses the formulation of level playing field, that is equal opportunity policy, to create level playing field, after which each individual is on his own. What outcomes finally occur will reflect individual efforts, and different outcomes are acceptable. Difference and equality. This is a comparatively new addition to the debates on equality. The roots of this lie in the politics of recognition and multiculturalism, since multicultural approach to equality is based on real equality and not formal equality. That is, multicultural theorists argue that because all individuals are not equal, going by the liberal principle of equality as treating all equally leads to gross inequality. The multiculturalists demand for equality on grounds of cultural differences. They asserted that in a liberal setup, difference of culture, customs, religions, and so on are not taken into account, and liberals treat all individuals as mere citizens, leading to inequalities. Multiculturalists argue against equality as equated with uniformity. Equality has two levels: shared human nature and cultural. Treating humans equally requires that both these levels are kept in mind, since different cultures have varied structures and customs and therefore values differ. Equal rights do not mean identical rights. Equality does not mean only rejection of irrelevant differences, but also recognition of legitimate and relevant ones. Michael Walzer coins the term complex equality in his book. In the Spheres of Justice, he defines this as complex equality means that no citizen standing in one sphere or with regard to one social good can be undercut by standing in some other sphere or with some other social good. Thus, citizen X may be chosen over citizen Y for political office, and then the two will be unequal in the sphere of politics. But they will not be unequally equal generally so long as X's office gives him no advantage over Y in another sphere: superior medical care, access to better schools for his children, and so on. Thus, equality is one concept that has occupied political philosophy from ancient Greek times and is still very much relevant in today's world. There are variants of equality, as we have seen from the above discussion, but equality needs rights to complement itself as well. Let us summarize whatever we have picked up in this module, including the various debates and dilemmas surrounding the concept of equality. We realize that the conception of equality and its very evolution has been marked by throwing up of various ideas by different scholars. In the concept of equality, firstly, the idea of formal equality developed. However, the limiting of equality to legal rights wasn't sufficient. Therein, we moved to the equality of welfare as propounded by utilitarians, especially those like Jeremy Bentham. However, the vacuum within this theory moved on to the terrain of equality of resources, especially with the theory of Dawkins, who propounded the idea of resources further needing the issues of luck and insurance to be mitigated by various means. Amartya Sen's theory of equality of what, especially focusing on equality of capabilities so as to focus on human diversities and human talents, led to further evolution of the term of equality. Finally, equality has led to what we now understand as complex equality, as stated by Michael Walzer. He clearly states that there cannot be one primary set of goods as propounded by John Rawls, but in fact there needs to be a diversity of various social goods, all in different spheres with their own principle of distribution. This complex equality thus requires different principles being propounded in different spheres and being adhered to make the idea of equality relevant in today's concepts. Thus, rounding up, we realize equality is still a rather debatable topic and needs constant exploration for further understanding and more evolution. Thank you.